Hello and welcome to Formula One fans. I got sick and we're all adults who have extremely stringent schedules in daily lives. So, yeah, that's why we're unconventionally doing a post race show on a Sunday. But let's go ahead and get into it, guys. Italian Grand Prix, Monza, very exciting race, very exciting weekend. Non-predictable outcome, I would say. Big gamble on strategy that took place, and yeah, but Monza was resurfaced for this since the last event, and no longer can you like ramp off and jump on your car on top of somebody else, and like we saw in 2021 with Verstappen and Hamilton. The runoffs on these chicanes like are very crucial because of that as well. Like I'm certain that like incident is what prompted this change, but it like certainly augments the racing lines that these guys are taking. And you saw a lot of runs in the gravel as they're just absolutely pushing the limits and finding new limits on this track. So that's what made this weekend so exciting for me. The Formula 2 race was very, very exciting. Greg, what do you got on the Monza resurfacing?
I think it went well. We saw a number of people take to either the inside of chicanes or go down the outside runways and whatnot. And I don't think it took away from the racing. We also didn't hear any like, oh, they have to give it back and this, that, and the other. Like the stewards didn't seem to have to get involved with that. The drivers pretty much understood what it was all about. I think this promoted a lot of the late passes we were seeing, and some of them ended up being dive bombs, but that might be down to just the new surface, people not being used to it yet. So I think all in all, it was a benefit, right? The way they changed the curbs, the way they resurfaced, because at the end when everybody's doing qualifying laps and like the top 6 cars, that's racing. That's why I buy a subscription every year, is to see that kind of stuff.
No, totally. It definitely brings about a new sense of excitement, and again with just how unpredictable this race turned out to be. Ferrari took a good gamble on doing a one-stop strategy versus a two-stop. McLaren and Piastri took ownership of it very maturely too, man. Just everything we love to see from Oscar Piastri, we saw in his post-race interview. He took ownership of him advising that no, we have to stop again. He had front left tire degradation, and in the time and under the circumstances, it seemed like he made the right call. And I don't fault him for it. Also, post-race wise, okay, respond.
Yeah, you want it right now?
Yeah.
So I was watching his lap times, and I even made a note about it because I was so impressed. He was still faster than everybody with 19 lap tires. At lap, where is it? Lap 34, 17 lap tires. He was still the fastest car on the track. So whether they thought it was going to fall off a cliff and it was going to go to crap, different story. Huge props to Ferrari, especially Leclerc, because he did carry those tires to the end. And maybe the reason their car was a second slower than the McLaren's is because they had more downforce, which allowed them to carry it. So I'm not saying McLaren blatantly made the wrong choice, but I question it. Seeing how decided this win was, it was like Leclerc was like, okay, yeah, cool, I'll just go win the race now. Bye. And he ran super consistent laps to the end.
No, they did a very good job designing the car for this faster track. You saw basically just like hacking away of the front wings and the rear wings, especially from Red Bull. I wonder if they took too much downforce away to try and get rid of the resistance.
Were they squirrely?
They were. I didn't see a lot of both were complaining after practice that the car was impossible to control. And Max especially was complaining about how he was fighting it. And it's important to note and mention that they can't go and replace a new front wing or equip a new front wing because it cuts in their cost cap. So they're literally like hacking away the existing wing in a aerodynamic fashion to save costs and then improve it for this. And you kind of see the bad side of the gamble for Red Bull and what came out of that cutting away. F1 Media did a good tech talk on that this week.
Props to FIA for instituting this notion of you're allowed to cut things down, because those wings are physically made different now. Like they used to be completely hollow and they're like super light, like grams, not pounds, grams. And Now, in order to cut it away, they have to build those solid where they know they're gonna cut. So this has changed decidedly the design aspect of how Formula One cars are created, purely so they can have this ability to adjust stuff at the track on the fly, like kind of old school. And I dig that because they're gambling. They're like, well, we've got 2 of these wings. Let's cut one of them up and see what happens.
And I'm under the impression that the absence of Newey and a lot of this kind of cutting away and designing, I'm not sure if he is absent in this or what his role was in this, but it doesn't seem like Red Bull has it together right now, based off of the performance that we saw, like qualifying low. Max did have that really like 6/10 of a second mistake on the very last turn where he just got skittish or like skidded out a little bit, and it just cost him that much. But that was the difference between him going P1 in qualifying and then falling back to 6th where he started. One thing I wanted to bring up was Checo. Is he redeeming himself by staying consistent, fighting the car with Max, but staying right, like at the pace we would expect for Checo to be behind Max? I think a lot of the knee-jerk reaction, I wouldn't even say knee-jerk because it was a long extension over several races that we were reacting like to kicking Checo out the door. Do you agree with me? Like he's doing what he needs to do and all he can to keep his seat. And I think as long as he keeps this up, we'll see him for the rest of the season and potentially next year in 2025. I don't think that they would neg out on his contract if he continues to deliver in the manner that he is.
I wonder, because you see McLaren with 2 fast drivers up front and they're keeping it clean and they're pushing the pace. You see Ferrari with 2 fast drivers. They're going to still have 2 fast drivers. I wonder if Red Bull's thinking, okay, well, he's decent, but we've got Lawson in the waiting. We could move Ricky up. Ricky's been reasonable, although a little dive bomb today. So be interesting to see what happens next year. I'm not going to put any money on it, quite frankly. But Checo is a cash cow. He is an extremely popular driver in a number of countries, and there's just no doubting that money means everything in Formula One. Like, look at Colapinto. Like, he's here because he had $4.5 million ready to go, right? Also a great driver, but it doesn't seem like anybody's getting in free these days.
No, for sure. And yeah, we've discussed in our previous episodes, cash is king, and Checo delivers that money, and is very well loved, and we've also discussed the loyalty in Formula One. I'm a huge proponent that drivers go get your money, do whatever is best for you, because very few teams are actually going to be loyal to you and stick by you. And so this might be a contradiction to that, where we actually see, Red Bull saying, hey, you know what? No, like, we know he's struggling, but we're going to stand by him. We're going to let him finish out the year. He's a 10-year driver. He's been consistent for us and delivered. We won the constructors because of his consistent performance in the past. Like, let's see what he got. But I think that they were kind of tepid and waiting to see how he came back from the summer break. And to his credit, he's doing all he can. Yeah,
but since Jay's connectivity made him drop, I'm gonna jump in with the tinfoil hat stuff here on his behalf. There's this notion that they're using Checo to intentionally lag behind Max so that they get second in the championship and they get more wind tunnel time leading into the redesigns. If that's the case, the worse Max does, the better Checo is allowed to do in that tinfoil hat scenario. Just put it out there. I want Jay to be represented here in his time of connectivity needs.
So his point is that one race is not enough. My counterpoint to that is it was 2 races. He performed similarly in Zandvoort. He's staying in 8th place. He's staying in the points. They are more than likely now going to get caught by McLaren and lose the constructors. But as long as he keeps doing it this way and stays out of crashes, I think he stays.
Right.
Or we'll see if our theory of dropping him after the Mexican Grand Prix is what is in the wait for him. So,
yeah,
I get a little bit more empathetic for him just because I can't imagine what it's like for a lot of these guys. But I hope he gets to finish out the season at least. He certainly paid his dues in the sport, and I want nothing for the best for him, just like I wanted nothing but the best for Logan Sargent. But we saw how that played out as well. So again, loyalty makes the sport. Bortoleto in Formula 2 went from dead last to first. He got the gift of a safety car on the 9th lap.
Yep. A couple of them.
Yeah, he got a couple safety car gifts, and because of that, he was able to do seemingly the impossible. Very, very cool race to watch. I honestly do not watch enough Formula 2, but I'm certainly going to start just about every weekend as long as I have time. Yeah, it was a good, exciting race. Did you get to catch any of that, or?
I saw the highlights. Looked like a proper mess, but those kind of wins, like, you can't take it away from him. Like, he was there to win. His team made the right calls. Some of it was luck. So for anybody thinking like, oh, well, he just won because of safety car, like, well, yeah, and that happens in F1. That happens in every series. Somebody gets a good yellow flag or whatnot, and they just come through. You can be damn well sure that the FIA is checking to make sure Briatore wasn't behind the pit wall when this happened. Just, got to be safe. Got to make sure. But yeah. All right.
It's strategy.
Yeah.
And good strategy is what happens in races. And sometimes it plays out just purely in your favor. And yeah, anybody else, well, not everybody could have pitted there, but like he just got a lucky break. And it's awesome. And he still had to fight. It wasn't like he just got gifted a win. You still got to finish the race and put the pace down. And he certainly did. So he spun off in qualifying. That was the reason why he was at the back. So it is what it is.
Yep.
Front row for McLaren.
Oh yeah,
qualifying. And
elephant in the room here.
There goes Lando when he starts in the front.
He managed to lead the first corner this time though.
In this too, like especially at Monza, like it's a very, very difficult start. So it was sort of, hey, how is this going to play down? I did not predict Piastri shooting out in front of him. It was a brilliant, beautiful move. We talked about Oscar's post-race interview, but Lando, to his credit too, was very authentic and genuine in saying, wasn't disappointed that there weren't team orders, wasn't disappointed that Oscar had passed him, and said, no, it was all to his credit. He made a brilliant move. He got past me. And he drove a great race, and he was smiling and laughing about it, and like that was awesome.
Yeah.
It
was nice because they're so young, right? We're sort of starting to expect this from Piastri because he's so chill, but Lando is a very boisterous person, very like big personality. He very easily could have been upset by this. Matter of fact, when I watched the cool down room, I thought, oh, that's a tense cool down room right there. They're kind of awkward. But this was the first time they'd seen stuff. It was like 5 seconds after getting out of the car. So to have them get down to the interviews and do that stuff more, I don't know. It was nice.
Yeah, no, I really like to see it. Just because typically Lando, I specifically have criticized him harshly for his conduct and candor in post-race interviews. Go ahead and jump in, Jay.
I was going to say, can we talk how bad that debrief is going to be? That move by Oscar at the beginning was arguably one of the most ballsy passes I've seen in years. And to do that on your teammate, straight disrespect. No questions, no nothing. Disrespectful as fuck. Oscar is now in the cards for trying to go for that championship. I don't care what McLaren say. If they wanted Lando to win that championship, today would have been the day to do it. And they didn't. They fucked Lando and said, okay. I would say if Max walks away from Red Bull to go to Mercedes, Lando walks from McLaren to go to Red Bull.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because Zach Brown has a whole hard on for Oscar. So he ain't getting rid of Oscar.
Do you think it's because of some of the criticisms, I say we, but really me, have leveraged against Lando versus Oscar? When I talk about the attitude, the conduct of the candor, like team radio calls, following team orders, who's the better driver that you want to have on your team? The guy that listens to you, that's logical, rational, reasonable, and stoic in his, the way he reacts to the media and the way he responds to things, or do you want sort of this hothead who's, blows the start when he's in pole position and crashes when he's racing wheel to wheel?
So here's the thing. I think you do need both of those drivers, and Red Bull has proved that. Red Bull's proved that. Mercedes has proved that. There's been teams that across the times have proved that you need that psychotic driver that's willing to do anything for the win. But you also need to balance it out with somebody who's going to listen, who's going to do what they're supposed to do to bring home the points whenever they fuck up. The other one fucks up. And I think that's very much more important than anything else.
Yeah, it's like a team dichotomy is similarly to having most teams go with a very experienced driver versus a younger up and coming driver. You kind of want that type of dichotomy with your team, and when it comes to personalities and driving styles and just the way people are. Greg, what do you think about this?
I think it's interesting. There's this notion of should they push Norris to the front? He's higher up in points. We get a world championship out of it. Yes. But then when do you pay it back to Piastri? And I fear there is no good time to pay it back. And those drivers that take second fiddle, they end up pushing harder and causing more wrecks. And then you get the Silver War. I don't know as there's a good strategy here, but if McLaren's thing is we're going to let him race, and if we don't win the championship, so be it. That's sort of new ground for me in Formula One. I'm like, let's see how that works out, right? Because then I think the whole world will be like, you let Max win another one, you dumb son of a bitch, because we're talking about it right now. We might as well dive into this. Strategy. Conservative strategies have been McLaren's hallmark this year, whereas there have been people that have gone long or people that have gone short. Like Ferrari today went long, and they won. They won by a few seconds.
And it was so crazy because Oscar was gaining tenths of a second. And if this had gone 10 more laps, he would have had him. Even less.
If it would have went
less
3 more
10.
laps, Oscar would have had him.
I was going to say much, much less. I was being conservative, like some people are in their strategy. So that's where I came up with 10. But I was going to caveat with, no, it would have been much less.
Those tires were already starting to fall off. They would have fallen off by lap 3 at Monza. And there's no way that if it would have went 3 more laps, that Charles would have been able to hold on to that car.
Yeah, and he had at least a solid 1 second advantage per lap, which is plenty to just pull up in a DRS and blow right by. So literally would have been whatever lap he caught him on, he was passing him on that lap or within half a lap's time. So yeah, I was happy to not see crazy DRS trains. However, it opens the race up to these kind of scenarios where someone's like, we're just going to roll the dice. Sainz didn't make it. He had a 5-lap tire advantage over Leclerc. Somehow it just fell off, or maybe he was told to back off, which is a thing that the driver behind has to do sometimes to protect the person in front. Who knows? Sainz might have been the hero of Ferrari today.
He was told to buffer. You're dead on. Yeah. He was told to buffer and defend as best he could so that he could secure the win for Charles.
So
almost hold on before you jump in there, Rich.
Oh, go ahead.
If we're gonna talk about defending, let's talk about Max holding up Lando for about 6 fucking laps.
Yep.
That McLaren is just so much faster than the Red Bull is currently, and for Max to make that car as wide as he did is insane. Yes, it's Monza, I get that, but that first stretch, no. That was Checo level in what was it? Abu Dhabi? Yeah. That was Checo level of backing up. He cost Lando a win today.
He was using battery boost in places where it was only beneficial to stay in front of that car. It wasn't really adding to the lap time. It was no, we're just gonna make sure he can't get by, make sure he can't use that DRS. So that's Alonso level stuff there. Because whatever.
Really inexperienced wisdom level racing. Exactly what you're saying, man. You're taking the words right out of my mouth. It was you get that kind of strategy when all you do is focus on racing. And it was awesome for this is a masterclass on how to defend an F1 was what he did today. I would disagree that it cost Lando a win. I think he wasn't going to get in front of Oscar no matter what.
So
but we're speaking
would
in hypotheticals now.
I would agree and disagree because right before
What
the
do you
pit
do?
stop, Lando was up Oscar's ass prior to dropping in the gravel. He was right there. He was going to pass him. He dropped it in the gravel and then came in for tires. So I think as far as pure speed goes, Lando is definitely the better driver. As far as being calculating and knowing what your car can do, Oscar has him so much. It's not even funny. Like, he's leaps and bounds ahead of Lando on that. So I don't necessarily think it's wrong to say that he could have probably cost Lando a win between him and Sainz holding him up. I think that's what did it.
Yeah. Yep. Well,
So
we're gonna see.
Greg, I know you got to jump. Any parting thoughts and wisdom?
I'm really looking forward to the rest of the season. This is what I wanted to see from Max. I want to see how he handles not having the fastest car, not being in the lead, because he called out to his team and said, hey, I need everybody to pay attention. I know we're in a shit position, but it matters. And he's right. It'll matter at the end of the year. Like, he's watched Lewis lose by a point, Lewis win by a point. He's watched all these championships that came right before his time, and he knows we got to keep going, even though he, had great success the last 4 years. So I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see some of the other drivers come into their own. Happy to see Ricky, not just screwing up all the time. This is cool. Now I'm really excited about next season when a quarter of the field is rookies. It's phenomenal stuff. So we'll see who gets dropped, unfortunately, but the rest of the season looks to be good. So yeah, thanks guys. Appreciate it. Sorry, I got to jump earlier this week, but maybe we'll get something together. Maybe.
Hey man, life happens.
Take it easy, Greg.
We're all adults. We didn't record because I got sick and then I had to travel for work. These things happen to us, but no, thanks for your time, brother. I appreciate you.
No problem, man. Happy to
Be
be here.
good,
See you
man.
next time. Take care.
Yep.
Jay, I want to talk to you because we were talking offline about the Antonelli announcement and the timing of this, and you had some pretty strong opinions on this one. So go ahead and hit me.
So, Toto, I thought Zach Brown and Christian Horner had fucking the lockdown on Petty. It took me till today to realize the amount of petty that Toto Wolff takes it to a whole new fucking level. He literally waited. He's known that he was going to take Kimi Antonelli since 2 days after Lewis signed with Ferrari. We know that now because Toto has said it. Lewis said that Toto told him it, yada, yada. We know this. But for you to wait 7 months to announce it at Tifosi headquarters is petty as fuck, because Antonelli is going to be a next level driver. Just by the looks of it, just by knowing what Mercedes is going to come out with in 26. He's not going to light the world on fire next year, I don't think. Just because the Mercedes is already starting to fall back. There's issues coming up, everything like that. Antonelli in 26 is going to be a force to be reckoned with. He is an absolute monster. And if it wouldn't have been for the resurfacing, I think he would have held it through the Parabolica and actually did something. So you've got a next level talent that Ferrari would literally kill to get, who's Italian, and you announce it at Ferrari's home race. That is petty to the extreme. Fine, you take my generational talent, I'm taking one of your nationals. Fuck off.
So I'm going to go against you here because I think that the timing of this has to do with that Italian heritage specifically. I'm going to take it at the face value and say that they did this because this would be Antonelli's home race. Very similar. And this was also sort of critically commented on as well. But when you remember when George Russell got announced that he was going to Mercedes, they did it at Silverstone, his future home race, or his home race, really, because he's British. So to me, that was my takeaway from this. Like they announced it at this time because this is in front of his home crowd, and he's going to get a huge following off of that. I don't put it past them to be that petty. I don't put it past them to manage the media in the way that you're implying. I just think that I'll give him a little bit more credit and benefit of a doubt and say that this is why they did it. It was to announce it and to add to the Italian experience. We saw just how awesome and amazing the Ferrari fans are, the country of Italy, and just what great Formula fans they can be. It's a huge reason why this was such an important race for them this weekend, and the reason why Charles' win was so important and impactful to them. I love it. It's one of my favorite things about the nationalism sense of Formula One is when you get to a home race and a driver winning in his home race. Yes, I know he's a Monegasque, but you know what I mean. This is everything for the Ferrari fans, and Monaco is the sort of the home of all the F1 drivers. So really, really great weekend and experience all around. But I believe that that's why they announced it in this way.
So while I agree with you to a degree, and it's simply because George Russell was already pretty much forecasted for the better part of 2 years that he was going to Mercedes. Like, it was just a matter of time is all it was. And his performance at Spa that year sealed it. So that's kind of where I'm at with it, because I mean, he put Williams in second place on that one?
Yeah, and I mean, there was a lot of just open talk sort of between him and Valtteri, and
right.
I still think they did Valtteri wrong.
They did him dirty as fuck. There's no questions how bad they screwed over Bottas. Like, consummate. I was disgusted.
Yeah, being a consummate teammate, and this is where sort of the facts argue against me when I talk about being loyal to team orders and following team orders and, looking out for the betterment of the team and being an obedient driver and not necessarily focusing on yourself. Well, look what happened to him. He did all of it, and then he still got bent over and fucked. And that's where it's like, well, okay, maybe I shouldn't criticize Ocon so harshly. Maybe I shouldn't criticize some of these guys for, like Lando, for not wanting to abide by team orders so much, especially Lando now. They did. I think you're correct. I think they did potentially have cost him the driver's championship now. This one race and these points in the margin and in what he's chasing literally could have. It also shows you just how prioritized the Constructors' Championship is ahead of the individual Drivers' Championship. And it goes back to what we've always said, like, this is about the almighty dollar. It comes down and it boils down to one thing.
So I don't disagree with you. And I think that has a part to do with what is the difference between Lando and Oscar. Because, I mean, you got to remember, Lando is a paid driver. His dad invested a lot of money into McLaren in order to get him in there and start racing. Whereas Oscar literally said, fuck you to the team that brought him up, brought him into racing, did everything for him. So it was more like a situation of needs. Lando needed a seat and McLaren needed the money. Whereas with Oscar was just looking, he had a seat, turned it down to go to McLaren because he felt that it was a better program. And I mean, granted, right now, yes, he is absolutely 100% right.
Yep, I would agree with you. One of Greg's comments in the notes was that McLaren does not seem to care at all. And yeah, he's in agreement with me that they're not. We heard the term papaya racing rules or papaya rules over the radio, and it was basically race each other, don't come into contact, but go ahead and push on each other and it's whatever happens on the track. I'm happy to hear that, because like that should be sort of the team order, and let them do what they're doing. Although I'm kind of going back on myself and in the things that I've said, and I feel like since he wasn't going to win, they should have given team orders to Oscar to put Lando in front of him. To his credit, Lando reacted maturely, just like I said before in the post-race interview, like immediately following the race, and he was genuinely happy for Oscar. But it felt like team orders would have been necessary today. What do you think about that?
So, looking at the race, even if they would have put in team orders, there's a chance then that Sainz gets past Oscar. Because at some point you have to slow down Oscar. Sainz is right there, ready to go around. Let's say he pulled a Lando and did it on like the last corner. You know, who's to say Sainz doesn't come flying around and take that place off of both of them?
It would have had to have been on like the very, very last lap before that long last swooping turn, and it would have. But that would have been some pretty good coordination over the radio with both drivers. I think, yeah, you would have had to say it on the last lap, like, hey, if this is possible, and here's my solution to this problem, like, hey, this is possible on the last corner, like, Oscar, slow down. You know you're not going to catch Charles. Let him finish, but like let's look out for Lando on this one, because Lando did follow team orders, you know, hesitantly and reluctantly, and that was the way Oscar got his first win. It would have been a good way for the team, I think, to give him it back, you know, and it would have done something for him to say, like, hey, in the future, when we ask this of you, if he's going to win and he's got the pace and you don't, because even if we muffed the strategy and it's our mistake, and we're asking a lot of you here, like, give it back. You know what I mean? Like he paid his dues, like pay back to him is kind of where I'm going with this.
So here's what I'm wondering, and obviously we'll never get the answer or anything like that, but I'm wondering if after Hungary that Lando didn't say, okay, no more fucking team orders. And that's why they've said, okay, Papaya orders, let's go. You know, he's like, because you remember his main gripe. If he can get past me, he can get past me.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if Lando didn't say, do not do this to me again. I will not listen again. And Oscar's like, fine. You don't want to listen? I'm not going to listen. Don't do it, period. And both drivers are just like, cool, let's go.
So we saw it from the media asking Brown, like, hey, what does this mean? This term, you know, Papaya rules. Like, what does this mean? And, you know, he basically said it just means, you know, race each other hard. Don't come into contact with each other. It does sound like, okay, maybe we're going to suspend team orders for the remainder of this season. Whoever finishes where they are, we'll leave it to the track, right? And we won't do this anymore. That way there's no controversy here. And if Oscar can beat you, then he beats you. And we're not going to ask you to trade places. And they're doing it the same for that. That makes a lot of sense to me, actually. So I don't think you have your tinfoil hat on this one. I think that's just good analysis.
Because you got to remember, up until Hungary, where Lando was a petulant child with everything, that he was F1's golden boy. Like, he was that fun, goofy kid, everything like that. Everybody loved him, yada, yada, yada. I think it did enough damage to his PR that they're like, we cannot have this happen, because the main reason why most people like Lando is because he's not Max. He's not Lewis. He's not Kimi or Seb or, you know, Alonso. He literally is none of these winners. No, just none of these winners from the past 20 years. He is this, everybody loves him. Everybody's going to buy his merch, where you have the stoic, similar to Kimi Räikkönen in Oscar. So you literally just hurt your PR image to the point where people are legitimately throwing down hate now on Lando. Like, Team LH is straight up anti-Lando. And that's huge because that means they came off of Max a little bit, but now they're like full bore against Lando for a comment that didn't seem that bad. You know, so it's like, I think a mix of, I don't want team orders anymore, kind of like Max did in what, Brazil? When was that? Was that 22? Yeah, I think it was Brazil 22 where they're like, let Checo pass you. And he's like, I'm not doing it. No, I've told you I won't do that.
Yes.
And I think
yes.
that's what they're trying to avoid is another situation like that.
Well, in like I mentioned, not too long ago, we see what happens to drivers who do follow team orders. And so it makes me question my own stance on this and at least critically think about it is, for me, from a perspective of trying to manage talent and drivers and manage a team where really the only thing that's going to matter to me is the Constructors Championship and that money. I think I want a driver who's going to follow team orders. But to come along with that, you have to issue those team orders fairly and give people their justice and do what it's supposed to be. It would make sense to me. You're like what you're going with McLaren and why they didn't issue team orders today. So yeah, good perspective, man. Red Bull, like RB's pit crew bent over Ricardo today. He was supposed to serve a penalty. One of the pit crew members touched the car. And that was a no-go. You saw his immediate reaction. Like he just like raised his hand to his helmet, like, damn it. And I attribute that to muscle memory. That pit crew has put in good, like very consistent sub 3 second pit stops for them. But it's no excuse. You have to be able to know mentally, like, I can't touch the car. And that should have been all he was saying to himself. But everything in his muscle memory is saying, touch the car. And like, I just think it was a mental lapse in judgment. And unfortunately, it was a penalty on a penalty. What do you have on that, man?
So this is going to be unpopular. And my feelings on Danny, everything like that. I think he's a good racer. I think he's done more enough to prove that he's still Red Bull caliber. But he came in too hard on the pit box. If you look at that again, the dude bounced back. Like he was bracing himself. Like I think he just came in a little too hard
with DR.
Yeah, I think he came in a little too hard.
I'm going to say, man,
it could have been that the guy was out of position for where he's supposed to be, and Danny was coming in at the right place. But as a driver coming into that pit box, you have to know where those other 10 lives are because you could end one right there on the spot. Like maybe not end his life, but end his livelihood to the point where he can no longer do that job. So if the guy was out of position, it's his fault and Danny's fault because, like I said, you should know where your pit crew is coming in. But on the other hand, if the guy was just out of position and kind of like lost his balance and grabbed the car, that's all on him.
So it could be a combination of things too here. So like that was a factor that I wasn't considering when I give, my assessment of this was, he did burn in and he did stop like in a not natural way or like exactly where he was supposed to. But like that's so freaking hard. And like this level of like touch and transition and what they're doing there is sort of the equivalent of passing the baton in an Olympic 4x100. And like it has to be synchronous. And that's why I keep saying muscle memory is because your muscle memory right there is touch the car, get to it and do what you're supposed to do. And it seemed like that was what happened. And that was the acknowledgement from the pit crew member. And that was why he was like hitting his helmet, like son of a bitch. Like,
the pit crew member
in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm not saying that the pit crew didn't fuck up.
But if we know he has to,
Danny Rick
he has to do a penalty. So you mentioned the position of these people and you're dead on accurate. And I'm not going to argue your point because you're absolutely right. As the driver, you're responsible now for all these people's lives and safety. and I'm not going to argue a safety thing here with you. What I do think though is like, hey, if we know he has to serve a penalty, well then don't be in the position to touch the damn car. Don't be there in the first place. You should be saying, hey, I've got 5 seconds until I can touch the car. I can't touch the car. Stand the fuck back. Let him pull in and park where he's going to park, and then you go and get in. And so it's something they'll have to address after this, right? Like they're going to address this ad nauseum, like probably far more than we are, and fix it. And I don't expect to see the same mistake coming from this pit crew in the future, especially not from that camp. But yeah, no, it was just something that happened and something that was unfortunate for DR.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the 5-second penalty that he got was bullshit anyways. Because, I mean, literally you saw Oscar do it to George Russell not even a corner before. You know, like it was an absolute bullshit penalty.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't have happened. I mean, how many times have we seen Lewis or Max or even Lando do this, like where they squeeze in and force somebody off? We just saw Lando do it, 3 races ago at Silverstone, I think? 4 races ago, whatever it was. But he just did it, like literally just did it. So the FIA, with the way that they actually do penalties, is beyond absurd at this point. And I don't even know. Like the fact that for a fact, whenever Lando clipped the freaking pit wall, that he came in too fast. There wasn't even an investigation into it.
Yeah. And he came in burning on this race and locked the front axle up very hard because
that's what I'm saying. He clipped the side of the wall coming into the pit.
And it was the timing of when he was told, right? And a little bit on him too. And so that's what I mean. We get this sort of sensation of a baton pass in a 4x100 Olympic sprint, and it's got to be down. And this is where your team comes into play big time. And so the McLaren team has a lot of work to do, in this week, going forward. There's going to be a lot of like meetings and, hard conversations that are going to be had on how do we fix this, because they can't keep doing this when they're in the running for the constructors the way that they are.
So the constructors is theirs now. Like, I'm not even trying to play. Like, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know what Greg was saying about the, oh my goodness, Checo with being able to be closer to Max and redeeming qualities and this, that, and the other. And it's like, it was literally one race. Last race, Max was second, Checo was 8. Oh, sorry. I apologize, Greg, in the ether to you.
Yeah.
But Checo is staying at 8th place, which is 2 points. 2 points isn't going to do shit. Like, I'm sorry.
Can he do any really better with the car that he has? If Max is placing where he's placing, what else is he supposed to do? He's not going to beat Max. Nobody expects that.
I'm not saying he's going to be able to beat Max by any stretch of the imagination, but this is kind of the same problem. Like, me and you have talked numerous times about this, about the Steelers never having a losing season underneath Tomlin. It's mediocrity. This is not what we're aiming for. We are aiming for being better. And the fact of the matter is that Checo is not the driver. He is scared of the car in general. And after Monaco, he has every right to be. I would be petrified of that car.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, that's the difference right there is, are you still going to be able to do your job? If you cannot, step aside. Let Danny Rick come up, run him for the last couple of races if Checo. So I understand they're going to run him till the Mexican Grand Prix at the very minimum. Like, that is absolute minimum that they're going to run him to is the Mexican Grand Prix. Because if they pull him before that, it's suicide. Hold on.
So one thing Greg and I were talking about was the modifications that have been made to the car, and those guys like basically taking it off, like basically dremeling it out, to decrease the resistance and amount of downforce on it. And they're doing this to avoid, hitting costs with new wing upgrades. But I wonder if they got it wrong. And it appears that they have got it very wrong. And it does appear that Jos Verstappen's comments are spot on. They have been degrading with their upgrades and regressing in their performance. And they can't just swap in a new wing without suffering a penalty. And so they can't go back to what they had, and they just have gotten it wrong. I wonder how much the Newey factor and him leaving plays into all of this. I'm curious to hear your opinions on that.
So you got to remember, Newey is still with Red Bull until February of 25. He is still with Red Bull. He is still touching those cars. He is not on gardening leave. He just is not coming to the track every weekend, is the thing. So he still does have a say in some things. He's still doing behind the scenes work for them, everything like that. Because we just saw him at Silverstone, I think it was.
Right. So, but with these aero modifications, okay, and it's him, then good. But where's the struggle coming from then? Why are they hurting so bad? Why is Max in 6th place? Checo being in 8th when Max is in 6th, to me, means that Checo is doing what he's doing. He came back, and this is the best that he can be expected to do with the car that he has. If Max is in 6th, then he's doing what he needs to do.
I don't disagree with you on that. Then this is one race, like I said. Last race, no, Max was in 2nd in Zandvoort.
But Checo's still fighting the car. So
if here's the thing, though.
The break, and that was because of his mental performance. But this feels like he's still in 8th with the poor upgrade.
Checo's car is reverted. You have to remember that. Checo's car went back
you're correct.
On the upgrades.
Excellent point of correction. Thank you.
So the fact that Checo's car is reverted back to whenever they decide to revert it back to, or if it's an ongoing process, we don't know, obviously. Because, they could just be bringing different parts from the RB20 whenever it was still dominant. They could be adding things like, hey, this is what went wrong. Let's switch it back to the old spec and see which part is actually going wrong. I personally think the fact that they went to the 0 pods, or not 0 pods, but almost 0 pods, like Mercedes did, is the problem. I really do. I think that Mercedes realized that they were at the absolute peak of what that car is capable of. And if you look at last year's car at this time, before they switched it to the B spec for the rest of the year, that car was performing very similarly to the Red Bull. Correct. And I'm wondering if they have just not hit that ceiling. And they've been saying it for a while, that ceiling is a real thing. They didn't realize it whenever they developed the car, that there wouldn't be too many upgrades that are going to work. And I think now they're seeing that. And now they're doing damage control, trying to put as much wind tunnel time in as possible for 25 to correct it and right the ship. I think next year you will see a very similar car to the RB19 versus the RB20.
Yep.
And I think that's a lot of the balance issue too.
Yeah, and that's what I mean is like sort of when they're hacking and carving away at the front and rear wings is, if there's some sort of imbalance that's going on and taking place there. Ferrari, to their credit, seem to have gotten their upgrades down. Beyond the strategy, they were at a decent pace. Do you think we'll be able to see them on the podium in the next 2 races, given that they're very, very fast courses? Or do you think that this was just that one-stop strategy paying off and paying dividends for them?
So, judging by the fact that Oscar cut down that gap from 11 seconds to what was the final gap, like 5?
It was down near 3, I believe.
That's what I thought, but I didn't want to say 3 and be completely off basis. But Oscar cut that down from
2.664. The gap was 2.664 seconds.
At what was that lap 48? It was 11 seconds.
Yeah.
So I think it literally came down to the
That's why
fact
I
that
didn't disagree
Ferrari
with
did
you
not
when you
hit.
corrected me and say three more laps, it would have been there. Yeah, within 3 laps, I think you're right. As soon as and Greg chimed in too and said, like, as soon as he hit DRS, it would have been over. So as soon as he
Yeah.
fell within 1 second of him, that could have happened in 2 laps probably. So yeah,
As fast as he was going,
I wouldn't expect you
probably.
either. Singapore
So
is a very,
I'm
very
not
fast
holding-
track and tight track with a lot of turns. So it's sort of similar to Monza when we can expect of like how the upgrades would be expected to perform. But I do agree with you that unless they get some kind of miscue from the McLaren guys, they wouldn't be ahead of them.
Yeah, as much as I want to see Ferrari actually do something this year, just because, like, we all know my feelings on Lewis Hamilton. They're not pleasant. You saw the video I posted the other day in response to Fabian's show me proof that Lewis does this more than just once or twice. And I send him a video that has, 12 times of Lewis tapping that like that? But I don't want to see Lewis retire in a bad car. I really don't. Like, I don't want to see him win in 8th, but I don't want to see him retire in a bad car because I think it would do his legacy no justice.
No, I agree with you, and I do appreciate that. Like I never argue with you. He was the benefit of one of the greatest cars ever designed in the sport. And he did drive the wheels off it. You know, he did push it, and he's got the moves, right? Like his knowledge of racing and how to compete and fight for position is up there with some of the greatest of all times, in my opinion.
I mean, definitely. And
One
I'm not,
thing-
like I said, I don't try to take anything away from Lewis. I really don't.
Yeah.
I think he's been amazing for the sport. He's an amazing goal for a lot of young racers, especially African American racers. You know, because I mean, predominantly this has always been a white
Absolutely.
Hispanic sport. You know, it's never been, oh, hey, you know, there's
And
this random
dominated by
black guy
wealth
driving that
as
just
well,
killed
right?
all of us. You know?
Yep. And predominantly, especially even more so now, these days, where you count the millionaire and billionaire parents of who's on the grid today, and you start to question some of the validity of, how do you even get into this sport without spending millions and millions of dollars? One thing that Lewis is trying to correct and has been adamant in pushing the FIA to, hey, like, create driver academies so that karting kids can get into this sport and it's not so cost prohibitive. Because I've made the point in the past that I don't think we're seeing the best and most talented drivers in the premiere of motorsport. I think we're seeing
absolutely not.
Who's got the money and who can pay to play. And that's not what we want in the pinnacle of motorsport. We want the pinnacle drivers. We want the best in the world, and just like sports like baseball or basketball or soccer/football. We don't need you to be super wealthy to exhibit your talent. You can come from nothing and then have everything. And I think that should be the dream and what we strive for in this sport. Sort of how Lewis was. Like, he speaks about his dad and how he worked, 3-4 jobs and odd jobs on the side just to make money to buy tires for his karts. That's sort of gone and absent now from this sport. And that's not the way that it should be. It should be whoever is the most talented gets to exhibit their talents.
Absolutely. I mean, I've even had one of my sons come up to me and was like, why didn't you put me in the karting early? And I'm like, because we're not rich. Like, it's that simple. Like, I hate to be like that, but there is literally only risk at that point and no reward, because you're not going to see, your kids coming up through anymore. You're just going to see generations of the same family coming up. I mean, perfect examples, Senna's kid and Schumacher. I mean, neither one of them could race really. And they were out of F1 within 2 years, but that was 2 years in F1 and probably a good 10 to 12 outside of F1 where those kids could have been getting a shot, but because you had names coming up through, you had to take the name over the talent. And it's going to be the same way with money now. You either have money or you have a name behind you.
I still believe that Schumacher can race, and I think that what we're saying also supports my theory and something that we've discussed almost ad nauseum at this point. But the youth in the sport, and we say this with the announcement of Antonelli, 18-year-old coming to Mercedes, filling Lewis Hamilton's seat. Insane.
But are we looking now at another 24-year career? I mean, I think
it's a flip of the coin, man. We don't know, right?
Yeah.
It could be another Schumacher. It could be any one of these kids. It could be another Stroll. It could be, who knows? How do you handle this pressure? It could be Tsunoda, where you're just bashed into a second tier team and you're lucky to have another year's contract.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, like it's a fickle nature sport, and it's all driven by money, and there's so many off-track factors as well as on-track factors, and that's where I start to dislike some of Formula One, because I want to see Ayrton Senna. I want to see the kid that came from absolutely nothing. And
you do understand that Senna's family was rich,
okay,
right?
I know, but came from Brazil, a country that has absolutely nothing, right? Yes, his family wasn't rich, but they were very well off, especially considering where they were from in Brazil. They were
like the top 5 families in Brazil.
Oh, I did not know they were that wealthy.
Yeah,
but I'll use Lewis as the example, where his dad is working odd jobs on the side of his career, and he's sleeping on his dad's couch in an apartment. They couldn't afford to have 2 households, and that to me is kind of like the American dream. You start from nothing, you work as hard as you possibly can, you make sacrifices, and you hope that it works out. And in his case, it did. It is why his story is inspiring to me. It is why I like him as one of my favorite drivers. Greg and I started off this by talking about the resurfacing in Monza and how this new track plays versus in the past, where the runoffs and the chicanes are far more well thought out and far less likely to produce an accident. You're not going to ramp over these barriers on top of another car, a la 2021?
Max was just testing the halo. That's all. So I don't disagree, but a track like Monza and the surfacing that they put in, I kind of feel was fucking it, in all honesty. Like, I get the chicanes, I get the removing some of the curbs, I get everything like that. It's all about safety. The resurfacing, though, I think could have caused a lot more bad than good, in all honesty. Because perfect example is Antonelli's crash. He's ran F3 on Monza. He knows what he's doing. He remembers that track. It's muscle memory at that point. And then the resurfacing means you've got grip in places that you didn't have where you should be able to slide. I mean, hell, even Nylander dropped it. I think it was a big risk for minimal safety.
So I think it was smart because of the other classes of racing that take place. And so if you take the whole picture into consideration of a race weekend at Monza, and you're talking about the Porsche Cup and the F2 race that goes on, and with Porsche, you have so many more vehicles on track. F2, you have, a little bit more vehicles on track, but less experienced drivers, a lot of track runoffs, which is what I think sort of drove this, even beyond the 2021 incident. Although I think that was partially the impetus to why they lessened the curbs in this resurfacing and redesign. I think it's also, it takes into consideration the whole grand scheme of the weekend. I'm for it because of that. And it makes it safer for the Porsche Cup. It makes it safer for the F2 kids. and it just makes more sense to me. That's also like what you're saying bolsters my comments about young drivers. You have to know like that this is going to be completely different. You're going to get grips in part of the track that you didn't have grip before. You're going to run off in places and we saw that from some of the most experienced drivers in F1 qualifying and practice. Guys were running the gravel left and right, trying to figure out what the limit was on this resurfaced track. That's what comes from experience. That's what comes from 5 to 10 years of experience of being able to adjust to this track and knowing how to test and exercise your limits and learn where they're at without over exceeding them. And you see it with the youth where they don't know how to test their limits appropriately and they end up running off and crashing. And we saw that, with the new Williams driver for the replacement of Logan Sargent, ran right in the gravel during practice. But yeah, I think that's what it boils down to. What are your parting comment on that before we wrap up?
So I did hear what you guys said about him coming with 4.5 million in cash. James Valls, to his credit, turned down that money. He straight up said, no, we're not having somebody getting paid to be in the seat. So I will give him a lot of love and a lot of credit on that one. I know that dude's taken some major heat this week because of his comments that he's made. Now, granted, Williams has gotten more calls from Argentinian sponsors than anything to get logos on the car for him. But ultimately, the kid can drive, but he's doing no better than Logan Sargent did.
And that's fair. So Williams
I really think it's the Williams.
Albon, where did Albon finish?
12th? 11th?
He was 9th. Albon was in the points. And so that was a point that I had there. Albon made good use of the upgrade and scored some points this weekend. So shout out to Williams for actually getting it right. And that was why I was like, okay, I don't fault the kid on his first race, by
no means. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't expect him to like come out and light the world on fire. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm literally saying
he was 12th. Franco Colapinto was 12th. Not a bad debut for your F1 race coming in mid-season. Granted, this is a good track to come into. This is a familiar track for him that he's raced on before. This isn't Singapore or like Canada or one of those tracks or like Monaco, right? Like, can you imagine coming in mid-season to like Monaco as a kid from F2? Like, no way. I give him a little guff for running into the gravel, but again, rookie race is like a brand new F1 driver coming in mid-season. I think he did okay coming in 12th, and I think Williams upgrades are actually paying off. And so I would argue with you about the Sargent comment. Logan's best finish was 11th, and he failed to score points. So this kid coming in on his debut mid-season, that's better than Sargent.
Okay, so do me a favor though. Remember where Nick DeVries came in to replace Albon for that one race? Where was it?
Couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Monza.
Ah, shit. Okay.
So that's why I'm not buying into shit, because if I remember correctly, Sargent finished pretty well there in 23. I can't look it up right now because I am on my phone, so I apologize, but
no worries. But your one race doesn't mean much comment from before actually holds weight here. So I'll give you that credit, brother.
That's why I'm saying Monza is all about qualifying normally, but this was a weird Monza because obviously the stakes are out. They're nothing at this point. So you already have two cars off the grid. So you're looking at 18th. Yuki went out because of Hulkenberg smashing into him. So you're down to 17th or 18th, right? No, 17th. I was right. So you're already at 17th. You have damage to the Haas, Hulkenberg's Haas. So you might as well say 16th right there. You have Ocon and Gasly, who, while they're doing better in the Alpines, I'm not taking anything away from those two because they are doing better. But that team is still a ways away from being good. So you're already up to 5 places off the grid right there alone. Now, factor in the fact that Danny Ricciardo had 15 seconds in penalties. You're off 6 drivers now. Then take into account Magnussen's going to be a bowling ball somewhere. And he's literally finished right where he probably should have if he made no mistakes.
I was trying to think if we had any we were right or we were wrong this week. Do you think of anything?
We didn't have any because we skipped the Dutch Grand Prix, or right after the Dutch Grand Prix.
That's correct. Okay, we were right, but we'll save it for maybe next week. Hey, this has been a great episode, albeit non-traditional. Sometimes it's 1 and 2 guys talking. Sometimes it's all 4 of us, but we will do our best to make it happen week in, week out. Thank you for listening. Jay, thanks for coming on, man, especially under, travel circumstances.
Appreciate it as always, man.
Next week.
Definitely a fun day.
All right. Take care.
Yep.